It was difficult to open a newspaper or watch a TV news show without hearing about some famous couple getting divorced. Most celebrity marriages, it seemed, only lasted for a few months instead of years, and soon after their divorce, one or both of them would get married again. However, there were exceptions where celebrity couples stayed together for many years, just like regular people. I used to believe that long celebrity relationships were special because they required extra effort to maintain. But maybe I was wrong. If you were truly in love, maintaining a relationship shouldn't be so difficult. I stopped reading about or listening to the talking heads on TV discussing celebrities as if their relationships and lifestyles were of utmost importance to everyone on Earth. Their lives meant nothing to me or anyone around me. Sometimes I did wonder how I would react if my wife ever wanted a divorce. Would I get angry, cry, beg, and what could possibly lead to either of us wanting a divorce? As far as I knew, we were happy. We did things together, we enjoyed our date nights, and we both had jobs that we loved. Our lives were pretty much perfect, until I was informed that I would be going to Korea for a year without my wife. At the time, I was serving as a captain in the Army. My name is William Bill C. Christopher. My wife's name is Lois Diane Christopher, and she sold cosmetics for a well-known company. She was doing quite well because she received a percentage of sales from several other women who bought their cosmetics through her. They weren't exactly her employees, but they reported all of their sales to her and she received a cut from them. Her company also had conventions every year, and Lois never missed them. I accompanied her twice, but I swore I would never go again. Being surrounded by thousands of enthusiastic women at a convention center was overwhelming for me. Despite knowing that a short, unaccompanied tour was a possibility, we always hoped that I would be overlooked and not have to go. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I received an alert for a 13-month tour in Korea. The day I left was a sad day for both of us, just like it was for other soldiers who had gone through it before. Initially, I was assigned to headquarters, 8th Army, as a project officer in the operations office. However, after being there for less than 3 months, I was moved to the staff of the commanding general. It was a significant promotion for me, not in terms of rank but in terms of prestige. Lois and I made sure to stay in touch. We spoke to each other almost every day, expressing how lonely we were and how much we missed and loved each other. One day, she informed me that she would be attending her company's convention. Given that she hadn't missed one before, I wasn't surprised. The convention was going to be held in Hawaii, and she even bought 2 new bathing suits for the occasion. She sent me pictures of herself trying them on, and seeing her in those swimsuits only made me miss her even more. In case you're wondering who took the pictures, 3 of the women from her group were with her in the photos. I was in my office, 2 doors down from the commanding general's office, when his secretary brought in his travel schedule for the next month. The schedule was always classified until the event, meaning that only those who needed to know were aware of his travel plans. After the events passed, nobody really cared about the classification. His schedule indicated that he would be attending a 3-day conference in Hawaii before taking a week of leave and then attending meetings in Washington. He would be gone for a total of 2 weeks. Looking at the calendar on my desk, I noticed that 2 days overlapped with Lois's convention. Without hesitation, I put my name on the manifest for the general's plane. I was going to Hawaii. I arrived 2 days before Lois was scheduled to arrive. My plan was to surprise her, spend the convention with her, and then fly back home for another 10 days. I would meet the general's plane in Washington, D.C., to return to Korea. There was still room available at her hotel until the other convention-goers started arriving, so I requested a room there. I mentioned that I was planning to surprise my wife. The hotel staff checked her reservation. Dr. Nichols, she already has you on the registration list. It won't be much of a surprise. I was taken aback. She does, yes, sir. I can go ahead and assign you that room if you'd like. Let me think about it. I left the front desk in a hurry. Who in the world was Dr. Nichols? I could call Lois to find out what was going on, but if something suspicious was happening, she would have time to cover it up. I felt like I was stepping into one of those dramatic novels where the husband waits in the hotel lobby, hoping to catch his wife and her lover in the act. On the other hand, maybe I was just overreacting and everything was innocent. But if I truly believed that, I must be incredibly naive. so I had nearly 2 days to figure out my next steps. The hotel could provide me with a room until the convention attendees started checking in, but I might as well find another place to stay. Finding a hotel in Honolulu proved to be a challenge, as there were no available rooms. Then I remembered that the military had its own hotel. I quickly found their contact information and made a call. They had an available room, so I hailed a taxi and made my way there to check in. An hour later, I found myself sitting on the beach, pondering my next move. Eventually, I went to bed very late at night. The following day, I did some shopping in the morning and returned to the beach in the afternoon. Lois was due to arrive during the early afternoon, so I dressed appropriately for my plan and headed to her hotel. I had a hoodie on, which I pulled up over my head, and sunglasses that covered most of my face. When I reached the hotel front desk, I took off my sunglasses and pushed my hoodie back slightly so that the clerk could see me, but any potential cameras would not be able to identify me. At least, that's what I hoped. My sister will be coming in for the convention. Can you tell me her room number? Please, I'm sorry, sir, but all the convention attendees staying with us have pre-registered, and their keys are waiting for them at the registration desk in the convention center next door. Thank you. I put my sunglasses back on and pulled my hoodie up again. There were likely fewer cameras in the convention center, but I kept my disguise just in case. I stood in a long line and asked the lady at the registration desk the same question. She checked her files. She's in room 1286, and it appears that she and her husband just checked in. Thank you, I replied, then walked away. A large bulletin board caught my attention. It had a banner that read, "Find your group." I approached it and found Lois's group. She was scheduled to attend an advanced skin color class in 2 hours, and the room number was mentioned. I located the classroom along a long corridor lined with benches. The corridor was constantly filled with women, with their constant chatter making it impossible for anyone to sleep there. About 10 minutes before her class was supposed to start, I spotted Lois entering with 2 other women. I still had my sunglasses and hoodie on, but her entire focus was on the conversation she was having with her companions. So Lois was there. Now I needed to find out if this doctor, Nichols, whoever they were, was with her. I returned to the hotel and sat in the lobby, unsure of my next move. As I observed, 2 security guards occasionally walked around before entering an unmarked door. A few minutes later, one of them emerged wearing civilian clothes, and that gave me an idea. I walked into that room and looked around. There was an empty office of sorts, along with 2 doors labeled male and female. I entered the male room and heard the shower running. I looked around and found a guard uniform on a bench in front of lockers. I picked it up, checked the pockets, and discovered a chain with several key cards. I pocketed the key cards and left, making sure my hoodie and sunglasses were securely in place. I exited the hotel and walked until I felt safe enough to examine the key cards. After glancing around and noticing there were cameras everywhere, I stepped into a store selling wild Hawaiian shirts. Once inside, I went straight to the men's room before removing my sunglasses. As I suspected, one of the key cards had master written on it. I couldn't help but smile. I assumed that once the guard realized his key cards were missing, all the hotel cameras would be on high alert. I needed to be extra careful. I put my sunglasses back on and went shopping. I stumbled upon a blonde wig, which I took back to my hotel. There, I dressed in slacks, a sport shirt, and donned my blonde wig and sunglasses. I made my way back to the convention center and checked where Lois's group was located. She was still in class, so I proceeded to her hotel room. I knocked and announced that I was from hotel security. I did so twice, but there was no response, so I entered the room. I found her suitcase and carry-on, bearing luggage tags with my handwriting. Alongside was another suitcase and carry-on belonging to someone named Dr. Richard C. Nichols. The bed appeared to be in disarray, leading me to assume that they had engaged in a quick encounter before leaving. His clothes lay scattered about, as were hers, although hers were always scattered. He must have been by the pool or the beach, since his wallet and other items one would expect to find in a man's pockets were on the bathroom counter. It didn't take long for me to gather all their belongings and stuff them into one of the suitcases, as there wasn't much there to begin with. Even her makeup case fit. I left behind a pair of her pants and a pair of his shorts on the bed. I placed his wallet in my pocket, adjusted my wig, put on my sunglasses, and left. Throughout the hallway, in the elevator, in the lobby, and all the way to the taxi stand, my head remained down to avoid drawing attention. The first taxi driver in line loaded the 2 suitcases in his trunk as I sat in the back seat. Airport, please, he took me there. I paid him and took the 2 suitcases and stood outside. I stood there and canceled all of Lois's credit cards, even her business one. They didn't ask a single question, just agreed to cancel it. I also canceled her phone, all effective immediately. Then I canceled all of Dr. Nichols' cards and phone. I took the next taxi back to my hotel. I called the Air Force Base to see if there were any flights going back to continental United States. There were occasionally empty seats so members of the military and their families could hop a ride for nothing. There was one leaving for MacDill Air Force Base in Florida very early the next morning. I booked myself on it. When it got dark, I took the 2 suitcases down the 3 flights of steps, out the back door where there were no cameras, because I had checked, tossed them in the dumpster, and returned to my room to nap and get ready for my flight to MacDill. The flight was long with no in-flight service except sharing the crew's coffee and the snacks they carried for their own use. I had some cheese crackers and a couple of candy bars, but they weren't interested. At MacDill, I hitched a short ride to the Tampa Airport passenger terminal and booked a flight to Cincinnati. It was the earliest flight I could get any place close to Elizabethtown, KY, and home. In Cincinnati, I rented a car at the airport and took off. At home, the first thing I did was call a moving company. The second thing was to Google Dr. Richard C. Nichols. He was a pulmonologist in Elizabethtown and was married to Dr. Georgia Nichols, a pediatrician, also in Elizabethtown. I looked around Lois's stuff and opened her computer. She had 2 of them. The small one she had with her constantly for her business. There were lots of emails between her and Nichols going back 6 months. I had been gone 8. They started innocently enough. Apparently she had trouble breathing one day, and our clinic referred her to him. They started emailing shortly after that, then they stopped and started messaging. I hadn't thought of looking at his phone for messages, but I'm glad I did. Neither of them pulled any punches when it came to describing what they wanted to do to each other and what they did. If I had any doubts about their relationship, his phone dispelled them. It was a full-blown affair. The only times I was mentioned were when they talked about my coming home and they would end the affair. Neither was in love with the other, they just liked spending time together. He asked her if she would find another friend at our next duty station, and she said probably not, unless I went on another unaccompanied assignment. He told her that if that happened, she could come back to him. She told him no. When they were over, they would be over. He then told her they would have to make the best of the next few months. When the convention came up, they both thought it too good an opportunity not to take advantage of, so they planned to go together. He could easily say it was medically related and his wife wouldn't have a problem with it. The moving company came the next day and everything I wanted went to a local storage facility. Everything else went to Lois's parents in Texas. We were in government-provided housing, so I called them and said I was getting a divorce and was vacating quarters, and that was that. When she came back the next day, she wouldn't have a place to live. My next mission was to Mrs. Dr. Nichols' office. I'm sorry, sir, but you need a referral to see Dr. Nichols. I handed the receptionist Dr. Richard Nichols' wallet. This is my referral. I'll be walking out of here in 5 minutes. I looked at my watch. 3 minutes later, I was being ushered into her office. Where did you get this? She asked. In my wife's hotel room in Honolulu. What was it doing there, just sitting there with the rest of their things in a really must bed? I handed her his phone. You might want to look at his messages before they get home tomorrow. How will I tell my husband I got his wallet? You're a smart lady. You'll think of something, thank you, and I promise to keep you out of it. Lois's car was provided through her cosmetics company, so I couldn't touch it. Mine, however, was mine, and I had it towed to a garage for storage. The towing company left a notice on the door of the house she no longer lived in, but would see when she got there. I went to the visiting officer's quarters VOQ on base and took a room for the time I had left on my leave. I checked with the airline schedules and had an idea when she would be back, so I sat in my rental car and waited. It was early evening when her car pulled up. Junior officer housing didn't have garages, so she parked on the street. She jumped out of the car and ran to the door. The notice from the towing company was on the door. She took it down and read it. She unlocked and opened the door, and I saw her buckle to her knees when she saw the empty room. The front door stayed open as she apparently ran through the house. She stood in the doorway and took her phone out and called someone. The call didn't last long, and she had a look of panic as she rushed to her car. She left rubber when she tore down the street. I had no idea that car would leave rubber. My family was all from Louisiana, so I had no one close to confide in. There were still some friends from before I left to go to Korea, but none close enough to tell about my coming divorce. I felt alone. It took me 2 days to find an attorney. I wanted her served while I was still there, so I gave him her phone number, and when the papers were ready, he called her to come to his office. All he said was he had some papers for her. I was in his conference room watching on closed-circuit TV when she came in. When she was served, she passed out. When she came to, she asked where I was. My attorney didn't answer. He caught us in Hawaii, I know. I don't know how, but I know it was him. She said, then asked when she could see me. That question he could answer. Whenever he shows up, I suppose when you see him, tell him it didn't mean anything. We were just friends. He showed more than just a bit of irritation when he spoke again. I have handled hundreds of divorces, and with few exceptions, the cheating spouse never says they cheat because they fell in love. They invariably say it was just friends. Well, it's never just friends. Someone always gets hurt, so it's always about the relationship and something wrong in it. If you love your partner, really love them, you never need just friends. If your relationship is strong, you never need just friends. You messed up, Mrs. Christopher. You took a perfectly good marriage to a perfectly good man, and for just friends threw it away. I think you need to determine what it was that drove you into the arms of Dr. Nichols and try to fix it. Not in this relationship because it's too late for that, but maybe for your next one. She left his office walking slowly with a blank expression on her face. I felt no satisfaction in seeing her like that. She never called me, so I hung around town for another couple of days before going to catch up with my ride back to Korea. 3 months after my return to Korea, my tour was up and I was back in the States and at Fort Knox. I moved into Bachelor Officers Quarters Boku and retrieved both my car and personal items from storage. The first person I contacted was my attorney. We were still a month or so away from a court date for the divorce. My first few times driving through town, I half-heartedly looked for Lois's car, but never saw it. Most of my dinners were eaten at the Officers Club O Club. It was my 4th or 5th time there when I saw her. She was having a very intimate dinner with another officer. I recognized him as living in the BOQ also. I had never actually seen her with Dr. Nichols, so this was the first time I'd seen her with another man, and it stung a bit. I wanted to finish my meal without continually looking at her, but it was difficult. At one point, I thought she saw and recognized me, but she made no outward sign of it. When I was mostly finished with my meal, I signed my check and left. I saw her with the same officer 2 nights later. That time she definitely saw me, and her reaction told me she hadn't seen me 2 nights before. Later in the day room of the BOQ, I was talking to another officer, and 2 other officers sat near us. One of them was the man I'd seen her with both times at the club. She's a flirt, I tell you, he was talking. Tonight was our 3rd date and not even a hug. She's dated other guys and they all say the same thing. Not one has said he's gotten close. All we hear about is some imaginary husband in Korea if she has a husband. Why is she even going on dates? Who cares? All I want is a good time. I don't care who it comes from. That's pretty pathetic, Major. Trying to sleep with the wife of a fellow soldier who's overseas, come on. He's in Korea, for Christ's sake, not some sand dune someplace. In Korea, he can enjoy his time. Maybe he doesn't want any. Maybe he loves his wife. Cut me some slack. I didn't ask her to start going out on him. That's her decision. It's still pretty sad that you're trying to be close to her. I went up to my room. It was after midnight when the knock on my door came. I sleep in my shorts, so I got up and never bothered to put any clothes on. I opened the door and there she was. "Hello, Bill," she said. I just stood there. "May I come in?" I stood aside. She put her purse on the table by the door. I went into the bedroom and put on my trousers. She was looking out the window when I came back. "What do you want, Lois?" I asked. How did you find out I cheated? I was in your room at the hotel in Hawaii. I saw his stuff and the messed up bed. She grinned. So it was you. I suspected as much. What were you doing there? I told her my story. You didn't leave us much. I didn't intend to. The furniture you shipped is still at my parents'. You really had a scorched earth policy, didn't you? You messed around with another man while married to me. You shouldn't be rewarded for that. You told his wife it was a statement, not a question. I did, and gave her his phone and wallet. They're getting a divorce and it's really nasty. Good for her. Will ours be nasty? Doesn't have to be. What do you want me to do? Have you signed the papers? No. Why not? I wanted to wait until you got back and talk to you first. How did you know I would be back here? You're an armor officer. Where else would they send you? I planned a big, long speech I knew would make you forgive me and take me back. But now it seems so, I don't know, inadequate. So honestly, I don't know what to say. An apology won't work with you. Not for cheating anyway, and I certainly can't deny it. And I can't blame it on drugs or alcohol. So here I am with no way to help my own case. You're right, so why don't you leave? Because I know you. And it's been eating at you not knowing why your perfectly sweet, innocent, loving wife messed around with another man. Not once, not twice, but at least a dozen times, and enjoyed it every time. Okay, that's enough. I don't need to hear how much you enjoyed cheating. Get out. Okay, I'm sorry. I went too far, but I think you'd still like to know why, wouldn't you? For the first few weeks I did. I went through all the things I might have done wrong, but there was nothing. I did nothing to cause you to cheat. Once I convinced myself of that, I didn't care. It became your problem, not mine. You're right. It wasn't your fault, but deep in your soul, you want to know why I went to the door and opened it. Get out. I'm not interested. She had never sat, so she walked to the door, picked up her purse, and walked out. 3 nights later in the BOQ day room, I overheard the officer who had dated Lois bragging that he finally fooled her. I had the feeling she was mad at somebody and was messing around with me despite whoever she was mad at, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get close to her, and I did. Every one of the other officers berated him, and he became persona non grata and actually moved out of the BOQ because no one would have anything to do with him. The time came for our court appearance. My attorney and I showed up, as did Lois and her attorney. The judge asked Lois why she hadn't signed the application. Because I think there might be a chance to save the marriage. He looked at me. What do you think, Captain? Any chance of saving it? There may have been until 3 weeks ago when she cheated again. With a fellow officer. This time I had lied to the judge. There was never any chance of saving the marriage. How about it, Mrs. Christopher? Is he right? No, sir. He is not. Well, it seems we have a difference of opinion. That's why I love my job. Captain Christopher, what proof do you have that she cheated? The word of the officer she cheated with. A fellow officer? That's pretty low, isn't it? Yes, sir. Almost as low as a wife who cheats, I answered. Mrs. Christopher, will you take the stand? Please. Why? Because I'm going to put you under oath and ask you the same question I asked you before. What if I don't want to? Then I will throw you in jail for contempt of court. Do you see how that works? I want the truth. If you deny you cheated, then we get the gentleman your husband says you cheated with in here and ask him the same question, and so on and so on. Eventually we get to the truth. Now, will you take the stand? Please. All right, I cheated, she almost yelled. She looked at me. Happy now? Not yet. Divorce granted, said the judge as he banged his gavel. I looked at her. Now I'm happy, and it all went my way. She got half of what we had, that was all. A couple of months went by and we saw each other occasionally, but never spoke. The doctor's Nichols divorced shortly after we did. I neither knew nor cared if he and Lois went back to being close. Still don't. One Saturday morning I was sitting in the BOQ day room reading, and a female major came in pulling a suitcase and a carry-on. Do you need any help, Major? I asked as I stood and started toward her. No thank you, Captain. I'm perfectly capable, she said with a tree trunk-sized chip on her shoulder. I didn't imply that you weren't. I simply asked if you needed assistance, I said, and sat back where I was and picked my National Geographic back up and continued reading. She made her way to the elevator, pushed the button, and waited, impatiently I might add, because she pushed the button at least 2 more times. Maybe she just wanted to pee real badly, I thought, and chuckled. I saw her later at the O Club, but we never spoke. It went on like that for 2 weeks. She was nasty with everybody, so we all stayed away from her. Then we had our first cold morning. The weather had been changing as it does until then we had a great fall, then bam. That really cold morning was there. I was on my way to my car and saw the major looking under the hood of her car. We all knew her name by then because it was on the name tag she wore. It was Bradley. We neither knew nor cared what her first name was. "Excuse me, Captain, but could you give me a hand?" "My car won't start." I kept walking. Tough luck, lady, I was in my car and gone. I heard later that another officer heard me and repeated the same thing. That afternoon after work, I parked next to her car. As I was getting out, a service tow vehicle pulled up and she came out of the BOQ. She glared at me. Several of us watched from inside as they towed her car. The next morning I had to be in the office early. The weather absolutely sucked. It was the type of icy cold rain that chills you to the bone. I saw a figure hunched into the cold driving rain and I stopped and rolled down the passenger window. "Hey, soldier. Need a ride?" The figure turned and it was Major Bradley. She looked at me for a couple of seconds without answering. I wasn't going to sit there with the window down and rain pouring in. "Suit yourself," I yelled. I started the window up. "Yes, please," she said. "Where to?" I asked. "Post engineers," she responded. The post engineers were the construction and maintenance folks. They took care of lights, HVAC, plumbing, roads, and so on for the entire installation. The ride was silent until we got there and she thanked me as she got out. "My pleasure," I said sarcastically. Her car was parked at the BOQ that evening. As officers, we could eat in the dining facilities with the soldiers in the O Club, or we could cook in our little BOQ apartments. I liked to cook occasionally. Most of the others ate in the O Club most of the time. I did a couple of times a week, and there were small groups of us who would sit together. On weekends, most of the personnel living in BOQ went home or elsewhere, so the place seemed deserted. I, of course, had seen Major Bradley in the club eating, and always by herself, which came as no surprise. One Sunday evening, the place was almost empty, and I was by myself. I was surprised when she approached my table and asked if she could join me. I stood and looked around. "Are you sure you wouldn't be more comfortable at another table?" I asked. "I'm sure then, please." I indicated the chair across from mine. A waiter appeared from nowhere and held her chair for her, put her napkin on her lap, and gave her a menu. "Would the Major care for a drink?" he asked. "What are you having?" she asked me. "Gin and tonic." "I'll have the same," she told the waiter, and he left. "By the way, my name is Donna." We reached across the table and shook hands. "William, but naturally everybody calls me Bill." Nothing was said as she looked at the menu. I sat and waited for her to order. "Please," she said after she ordered. "Don't wait. Your food will get cold." "That's okay," I said, not really meaning it. Just before her food came, the waiter took my plate to the kitchen and brought both plates back together. Mine had been reheated. The Major and I ate mostly in silence. We made general comments about the weather and our jobs, but not much more. When we were finished, we stood to leave. We stopped to get our coats and made the quick dash in the icy wind to the BOQ. Inside, we both headed for the open elevator. She got off on 2 and it was 3 for me. The next few days were not quite as icy as before. Oh, the wind was still icy cold, but Major Bradley wasn't. It wasn't heartwarming, but at least she spoke. The other officers took note and accused me of moving up to her, something that several of them had expressed an interest in doing, by the way. I mention that because her personality was rather nice even while she was wearing her uniform. In civilian clothes, some of the guys hung around just hoping she would make an appearance so they could admire her. There were 2 other majors in the BOQ, and they were about her age. There were 5 of us captains, 4 first lieutenants, and 5 second lieutenants. The captains, including myself, and all the lieutenants were younger than me by about 2 years. One evening after she and I had eaten together at the club, we sat in the day room chatting until a couple of the younger lieutenants started shooting pool and getting a bit loud. "I'm going to my room," she said. "Me, too," I said. She looked at me. "Did you say you're going to my room, Captain?" "No. What I meant was, I'm going to my room." I stumbled over my words. "Oh," she said and smiled. It was a nice smile. In the elevator, she looked at me. "I'm sorry I started out as such a difficult person. Maybe someday I'll tell you why. I'd be happy to listen," I volunteered. Our relationship changed drastically after that. We ate together several times a week, including in my room. Her attitude toward everybody else changed as well, and I fielded many questions asking me what I had done to change her. She called me one morning and told me it was her birthday and wondered if I would have dinner with her. Not at the club. We can go someplace downtown that would be nice, I said. She stepped out of the elevator and every mouth in the day room fell open. We were only used to seeing her in uniform, in casual civilian clothes, so when we saw her dressed to go out, we were all surprised. I met her halfway across the room, and she took my arm as we walked out. I had chosen the restaurant and picked the best one in the city. It was a bit pricey, but well worth it. She wasn't happy when I insisted on paying. She maintained that she invited me so I was her guest, therefore she should pay. A bit of her old attitude was beginning to creep out. I reached across the table and took both of her hands, mostly to prevent her hitting me. If you insist on paying, go for it, but I want to tell you something. This is turning into a nice friendship, but if that negative attitude of yours starts to come back out like it looks like it's starting to, this will be the last time I ever talk to you. Do you understand? She nodded. Now, I would be honored if you allow me to treat you this evening. If we are still on speaking terms on my birthday, you can treat me. Okay, she smiled. Okay, and thank you. Back at BOQ, she invited me into her room for a drink. Her room was a lot different from mine. Hers was decorated. Mine was just a room with furniture and curtains. It was after 3 in the morning when I went to my room. I had a tough day at work the next day. Our dating became a regular thing, just like our makeout sessions. Intimacy hadn't hit the menu yet, but we both knew it was coming, and it came on our 6-month anniversary. We had dinner in her room. She was almost as good of a cook as I was. I was sitting on her sofa. She came over, lifted her skirt high enough to straddle me, and she sat on my legs with her knees on the sofa cushions. I watched as she did that and saw her legs for the first time. She leaned back, looked me in the eye, and put her hands on my shoulders. It has been almost a year since I've been intimate. Still, my partner cheated on me and gave me an infection. I was so embarrassed. I swore I would never be intimate again. I realized it was unrealistic, so I modified it after I met you. My divorce was still fresh when I first came here, and as you know, my attitude left something to be desired. She started unbuttoning my shirt. I changed my name back to my maiden name and used it. She leaned in and hugged me. She felt the effect that had on me, smiled and kept scooting. Back and forth. Back and forth. I reached and started unbuttoning her. Her dress was light blue with lots of lace. I couldn't decide what to do. Then I fondled, and after a short time I didn't know which I wanted to do, so I stood forcing her to stand as well. I took her hand and led her to her bedroom. BOQ apartments are small, and if you put a queen-size bed in the bedroom, it doesn't leave much room for anything else. We only needed the bed. We started making love immediately and passionately. She finally pushed me. My God, give me a break. I need a rest. Do you have any idea what you just did to me? That has never happened before. I assumed it wasn't the first time for her, but to hear her say it kind of stung a bit. Why? I don't know, but it did, but not for long. After all, she had been married. I really enjoyed being intimate with Major Donna Bradley and decided that I could make a habit of it. Actually, we did make a habit out of it until I was asked to go on a 30-day temporary duty assignment to Belgium where I would be working with NATO forces. It was an interesting month, and I enjoyed both the trip and the assignment. I called Donna and left a message that I would be home on Saturday. The BOQ was basically empty, as it normally was on the weekends. I put my stuff away and knocked on Donna's door, but she didn't answer. I headed for the club and a good dinner. I passed one of the smaller private rooms reserved for parties, dinners, promotion ceremonies, and the like. The double doors were open, and I saw nothing but women. One of them was Donna, and she was in a group of about 4, and they seemed to be engaged in a serious conversation. If it was about some guy, I felt sorry for him. Donna knew I would be back that evening, so I was hoping she would stop by for a welcome back session, but she didn't. I called her the next morning from my office, but she didn't answer. I stopped by her BOQ. Her car was there, but she didn't answer my knock. The next day I tried calling her again. with the same luck I had the day before, so I went to her office. Her secretary assistant gatekeeper told me she wasn't in, but I could see her pacing through the smoked glass surrounding her office. Something was wrong, and nobody was telling me what it was. That evening I sat outside her building until she came out and intercepted her before she got to her car. "Donna," she ignored me. "Donna, talk to me. What's wrong?" "Stay away from me, you jerk," she almost spit it out. "You're just like the rest." The rest of what? She kept walking. When she got to her car, she turned to face me. "I thought you were different, but you're just like my ex-husband. All you want to do is find a new partner. How many women did you have relationships with this past month?" By then her door was open and she got it, started it, and left. I stood trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I tried several more times to get her to talk to me. The last time was in the day room of the BLQ. As I approached, her only comment as she took out her phone was, "You're about 10 seconds away from having the MP's military police called on you for harassment. A charge of harassment was nothing to mess around with, so I left." I decided to do something she and I talked about doing before move out of the BOQ and into an apartment off the installation, and that's what I did. It only took 2 evenings to find one I wanted, and I didn't have much at the BOQ to move, so it was an easy transition. My first 3 nights in my new place, I slept on an air mattress. After that, I just waited to have delivered the stuff I put in storage when I discovered Lois cheating. The thrift store on post had kitchen utensils, pots, pans, skillets, and everything else a kitchen needed. The main challenge in the military is that after 3 years in one place, you're going to be transferred somewhere else. I had already been at Knox for almost a year. I had approximately 2 full years left before a possible move. Knox was a large base, and it was very likely that I would spend the next 2 years there without seeing much of Donna. I had another opportunity to go on temporary duty TDY. When I found out it was in Hawaii, I almost requested to be replaced, but I ultimately decided to go for it. 2 more weeks went by, and I was promoted to major. The ceremony took place in the same small room in the club where I had seen Donna the night before she lost control. I received my brand new shiny insignia and received congratulations from acquaintances. My TDY was set to begin less than a week after my promotion, so my orders had to be updated to reflect my new rank. 2 days before my departure, I was downtown having my car serviced since it would be sitting in my apartment complex for about a month. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was my ex-wife, Lois. "Look who we have here," she said. "Leave me alone." Lois, speaking of relationships, "I bet you haven't been having much luck in that department, have you?" "What do you mean, Donna?" "She's one of my customers, and when I found out she was dating you, I set her straight about you. I saw her last week, and she told me she asked you to stay away from her." "Oh, no," I thought. "That could explain a lot. What did you tell her that's not something I'll disclose? Seeing you squirm is too enjoyable for me. Have a nice day." She walked away and got into a car. Apparently, someone was waiting for her. On my way back home, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lois might have told Donna about me. I was packing when it finally hit me. She must have told her that I cheated. I couldn't think of anything that would hurt Donna more than that. Now, the question was, how could I fix it? I had no idea. Then it hit me. If Lois told her I was unfaithful, I thought I could find a way to mend things. I went through my files, made copies of my divorce papers, and put everything in an envelope. I had to be on the flight line by noon. By that time, the equipment would be loaded, and they would only have to load the troops. My ride picked me up at my apartment and took me to the post engineer's office. I went to Donna's office and swiftly bypassed her assistant. She looked up in surprise as he shouted at me. I placed the envelope on her desk. "The only thing my ex-wife could have told you to upset you as much as you are is that I cheated on her. I don't think anything else could have caused such a reaction. Take some time to read that." I pointed to the envelope, and then tell me who really cheated. Then find a man you trust and who trusts you, but make sure to communicate before jumping to conclusions and accusing him of something he didn't do. Communication is important. My ride took me straight to the airfield and my flight to Hawaii. We were boarding the plane when my phone rang. It was Donna, but I turned it off. I couldn't talk to anyone at 36,000 feet anyway. Upon landing, I discovered 3 voicemail messages from her. I simply decided that I wasn't in the mood to communicate, particularly with her. The month in Hawaii passed quickly. It was busy, but enjoyable, and the training was highly valuable. As it came time to return home, I was informed of a change in planes. We were on the flight line, loading when an Air Force NCO approached our group, asking for Major William Christopher. I raised my hand. "I apologize, sir, but your plane has been switched. Let me take you to it. I didn't care which plane I was on, so I followed him. He carried my bag for me. On the new plane, my seat was closest to the cockpit. After a couple of hours in the air, the co-pilot emerged from the cockpit and approached me. "Major Christopher," he asked. "Yes," I confirmed. "The pilot would like to see you in the cockpit." I stood up, entered the cockpit, and took a seat as instructed. "Have a seat," Major the pilot offered, indicating the co-pilot's seat. "Just be careful not to touch anything." He handed me a set of earphones. "Put these on, and we won't need to yell." I sat down and put them on. If you've never sat in the cockpit of a massive airplane, especially during flight, you should try it. It was an incredible experience. The pilot seemed to know how I felt because he refrained from speaking for quite some time, allowing me to take in my surroundings. Eventually, he broke the silence. "We haven't met, but we saw each other once. It was at the officers' club at Fort Knox. I was having dinner with my sister. I spent most of the evening and a good portion of the night listening to her talk about the disappointment she had experienced with the man she had been seeing, and how he was unfaithful to his ex-wife, a lovely lady who sells makeup. My sister and I talk quite a bit, maybe too much, but that's beside the point. The interesting thing was that she was in tears as she told me how much of a jerk her ex-boyfriend, or should I say, her ex, was, saying ex seemed difficult for her, for some reason. And as time went on, she cried even harder when talking about him. I looked at him. He was seated sideways in the pilot's seat, paying no attention to the controls. That massive aircraft seemed to be flying itself. A month ago, she received some documents that proved her ex-boyfriend's ex-wife was the one who cheated rather than the ex-boyfriend. Needless to say, she was thrilled and wanted to call her ex-boyfriend. "Listen, I'm tired of saying ex. She wanted to call you and apologize, but you wouldn't take her calls. She went to your office and discovered you were here. So being the good sister she is, she called me and asked if I was scheduled to assist with transporting you and your team back to Knox. I said yes, and she asked if I could talk to you and convey her apologies since you refused to hear them directly from her. She had been married before, and her ex-husband did cheat on her. She caught him being intimate with someone else in their bed. It broke her heart, and it took meeting you for her to trust any man other than me and our father. She even reclaimed her previous surname. She told me that when she first arrived at Knox, she had a chip on her shoulder, and nobody would talk to her or show her any respect. She even mentioned that you had some unkind things to say about her. That's because she was being difficult," he chuckled. "That's exactly what she said. However, it was all a result of her past experience with her cheating ex-husband. Then you came along and started treating her like a human being, softening her up. The turning point for her was when you took her out for her birthday dinner. From that moment, she was yours, even if you didn't know it. So here we are in the cockpit of one of the largest airplanes on the planet, flying over the Pacific Ocean, talking about my sister. I'm not sure if the American taxpayers would appreciate it, but oh well. What they don't know won't hurt them." Before responding, I checked his rank. He was a major. "Listen, Major, she didn't give me any opportunity to defend myself. She automatically assumed the worst. I understand she had a bad experience with her ex, but that had nothing to do with me. It bothers me that she painted me with the same brush she paints every man, except you and your father. I'm not sure if I'll accept her apology, and even if I do, the chances of us getting back together are minimal. I'm not particularly fond of her right now." We continued talking for about another hour before the co-pilot returned to his seat. As we deplaned at Knox, her brother approached me. "Listen, I'm going to have dinner with her tonight, unless you'd prefer to take my place." "No, thank you. I was going to the club for dinner myself because everything in my refrigerator has spoiled. I need to eat out. If you're going to be there, I'll find somewhere else." "No, you go to the club and we'll go elsewhere." "Good luck, Major, and good luck to you." Upon arriving home, the first thing I did was start my car to see if the battery had any life left. It did, and it started. The next task was to clean out my refrigerator. Almost everything inside had spoiled, so I gathered it in a large plastic bag and discarded it in the dumpster. I went to the local grocery store and bought enough supplies for that evening and the next morning. I decided to do my shopping at the base commissary, where things were more affordable. When I arrived at work, my boss informed me that I had been assigned to the Mideast. It was not the news I wanted to hear. It was a priority assignment, and I had a 2-week deadline to get there. The only concern was that I had recently signed a 2-year lease on my apartment, but luckily military leases always had a reassignment escape clause. It took me 2 days to get everything ready for the move. I put my household belongings back into storage and went on leave to visit my family in Louisiana. I left my car for my brother to take care of while I was away. I had been in the country for 4 months when I was wounded. 1 bullet hit my left leg and another in my left shoulder. I remained conscious until they brought me to the hospital, where they put me to sleep for surgery. After spending almost 2 weeks in the hospital, I was sent back to the States and stationed at FT Knox. They informed me that I would be there for another 3 years, so I found an apartment in the same complex as before I went to the Mideast. My furniture was taken out of storage and delivered, and I arranged it exactly as it was before. It felt like I had never left, except for the scars on my left leg and shoulder. I went to Louisiana to retrieve my car. While driving back home, I made the decision to buy a new car, and that's exactly what I did. For the first time ever, I allowed myself to indulge and bought a sports car. It had been a month since I returned, and there was an award ceremony for 4 of us who were injured while overseas. I declined to participate in the ceremony and requested that my boss simply give me the award in my office or include it in the inter-office memo envelope. He honored my request with a knowing smile. On a trip to the commissary to pick out a nice steak, a woman spoke up. "Welcome back, it's nice to be back," I replied, turning to look at her. She pointed to my chest. "You have a Purple Heart. Is that the reason you returned earlier than expected?" I shrugged my shoulders. We both hesitated until she finally spoke up. "I should have addressed what your ex-wife said, but I didn't. I realize now how thoughtless and uncaring that was, especially with someone you love. I misjudged you, and I apologize." She looked me in the eye when she said it. "I would really like to be friends again." I didn't say anything. "Can we at least talk about it?" I placed the carefully chosen steak in my cart and looked around before turning to her. "What do we have to lose by giving it a try?" she asked. "I don't have a good impression of you," I confided. "That's what my brother told me you said, and I can't blame you. But I'm asking for a second chance." I looked at her briefly before continuing to search for another steak. Once I found one, I threw it into my cart. She gestured towards it. "Is that for me?" I chuckled. "At my place. 6:30 tonight, just tell me the address and I'll be there," she said. I provided her with the details. "That's easy." I live in the same complex. When I opened the door for her, a flood of good memories rushed back. She was an incredibly attractive woman. I grilled our steaks on the small balcony that was attached to the living room. Baked potatoes, a salad, and some non-alcoholic beverages completed our meal. We didn't talk much during dinner, but we spent a lot of time gazing at each other. I walked her home around 11, and there was no hugs to bid goodnight. I waited 3 days before giving her a call, and we set up another date for that evening. We went on several more dates over the next 2 weeks. One evening, we had gone to her apartment and had a couple of drinks. She had seemed restless all night, and then she finally gathered the courage to move closer to me on the sofa. "Do you remember the first time we were intimate? It was in the BOQ, and it started on this very sofa." She paused. "Back then, I felt sure that you desired me, but now I'm uncertain. I want to be intimate with you, Bill, but I'm afraid of rejection. I haven't been intimate with anyone since the last time we were together. I want to be yours, Bill, yours alone, if you'll have me. And I promise that we'll trust each other again, for as long as we live. I want you to have a good time with me, just like the first time." And just like the first time, I became fully excited, and we engaged in similar activities, but this time they were even better. She gets her makeup done by someone else.